This is an interview with Andy Murasaki. Andy is an IBJJF Nogi World Champion, a three-time IBJJF World Silver Medalist, and most recently, this past weekend, Andy won the middleweight division of the Crown, the IBJJF's premier gi invitational tournament.
Hey Andy. So first of all, just to give everyone kind of an overview of where you've come up to this point now, could you explain to anyone listening sort of how you found jiu-jitsu and where you first got started in the sport?
Yes, sure. So I started training jiu-jitsu because of my dad. My dad was a first professor. Back in 2000, I think 8 or 7, I was 8 to 7 years old. And that was back in Japan. And also my dad, at the time when he started teaching me classes, I think he was a blue belt or purple belt. Also, like, at the time, honestly, we didn't have a lot of black belts in Japan. And like we could count maybe in two hands, like it was a handful of black belts in Japan, or maybe not even. And like my dad, as a blue belt, as a purple belt, he was teaching kids classes. He decided to teach kids classes, and I was one of his first students as a kid, and that's where I started training jiu-jitsu, in Japan at 7 years old, 8 years old, because of my dad. He was already in jiu-jitsu for a few years, I guess. And yeah, I started training. It was just as a fun thing, as a hobby, like once a week or twice a week. I remember when I started, it was only Saturday mornings. So like it was just a one class, an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe. And it was just Saturday morning, like every Saturday. That's it. And sometimes, depending on the weekend, sometimes the Saturday was a holiday, and then the venue wouldn't open, so we wouldn't have class. So it was a fun time. Like I was just a kid, just living life, just a kid. I didn't have any commitment to jiu-jitsu or anything. And I trained like that for about maybe 3, 4 years. Then when I was like 12 to 13, that's when I think I started training a little bit more, like 3 times a week. I was a little bigger, not big enough to join the adult class and actually train with the adult, but I was big enough to understand how to behave in adult class, like to be quiet and not to play around.
Yeah.
So I started taking adult classes because they have adult classes Tuesday and Thursdays night plus Saturday. So I started joining the adult classes just for the technique purpose and like just being around, I guess.
Yeah.
Obrigado. Water. Professional. Yeah, so I was saying, yeah, I started taking adult classes, and that's around like 12 to like around 10 years old, 11 years old. That's when I started training 3 times a week, and I felt the most improvement, obviously.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I like jiu-jitsu. I think I like jiu-jitsu, and I could do this for a living maybe, and then that's how everything started.
Were you competing back then when you were training just once a week?
Yeah, my first competition was like 2 months of training. So I literally took like maybe, I don't know, 10 classes, 8 classes, who guess? And I competed in my first tournament and I lost. Like I had only one match. I lost. I think I lost by points or something like that. I think I got like stuck in close guard for like 3 minutes and that was it. I don't know advantage. I don't know. I can't really remember. But I remember I lost my first competition. Then my second one was like maybe I've been training already 6 months or something like that. Then I had 2 matches and I was able to finish my first opponent. And then the second match was the final. I was facing the kid that lost my first competition, and I was able
Yeah.
to submit him. I was able to submit him with a nice armbar, and that
Nice.
I feel like that's when I was like, man, this is so fun. I love this, like. Because I lost, I was sad, but then I came back to the academy, trained a little bit more with more focus. As 8 years old, there's just so much you can focus, I guess. But like
Yeah.
I was more focused. I was more like disciplined, I guess, on the class, and I was able to submit my opponent that I had lost before, and that was like I felt so good about it, And then ever since, I never stopped competing.
Nice. Nice. And obviously you didn't stay in Japan, of course. So when did you make the move from there?
Yeah, so around when I was around 15, 2015, I was born in 2000. So 2015, I started like competing more often in Japan. So like I was competing 3 times or sometimes even 4 times a month, almost every weekend, and I was already winning like everything at my belt and in the country there. So I was like, next year is my first year as a juvenile. I want to try to do like the big competitions from IBJJF. So Europeans, Pans, World Pan American, Worlds, World Pro, whatever. So in 2015, like I was already planning, all right, next year I want to go to United States. So what I did was, not that I recommend or anything, I'm just saying what I did, what happened to my life, how I lived my life. But I dropped school. I stopped going to school, like traditional school. I was at school in Japan, like from 8 a.m. to like 4:30, 5 p.m. So it's a whole day thing. So I stopped going to school, and then I started working like part-time job. I started with a part-time job. It was like maybe 8 to 12, 8 to 1. Then eventually one day I was able to make them trust on me, like, okay, he's a kid, but he's able to work. I started working like 8 to 5, 8 to 4 p.m. And then I saved some money. With that money that I saved, I was able to buy my like airplane ticket and things like that to Europeans, Pens, and even Worlds, And the first time I came to United States to actually do the move was in 2016 in May, in May. So at around end of April, I competed World Pro that year, 2016. I had already won Europeans double gold as a juvenile first year, Pan American at BJJF, and then I went to World Pro. When I went to World Pro, I won my final there. I got my gold medal, and then I was at the backstage just packing my bag and about to leave the venue, I guess. And that's when I met in person Caio Terra, and that's where the connection started. He was like, "Hey, didn't you just complete the final?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did." And he was, "Oh, congratulations!" And I had texted him on Instagram like a few weeks ago, before that. And then he was like, "Aren't you the kid that texted me on Instagram?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am." And then he was like, "Man, are you coming to Worlds?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he was like, "All right, when are you coming?" And then I was like, "I'm coming like maybe a week before Worlds, because I didn't have money to stay there too long. So it was just maybe like if I was competing Saturday, I would get there maybe Wednesday, and stay maybe until Monday, I guess." And then he was like, "No, why don't you come earlier?" I was like, "Yeah, I can't afford it." He's like, "Just stay at the academy. Come stay at the academy." So, I go back from Abu Dhabi to Japan where I used to live. And then I get home and I'm like, "Dad, Mom, I got invited to come to the United States." The Caio Terra said like he'll have me in the academy. I don't need to pay for training. I don't need to pay to leave there. I wanna go there. I wanna go there, and my parents supported me. They were like, "Yeah, sure. If you wanna go, let's try, and that's how everything started. I was supposed to be there for only a month and a half. And then, like just life happened to change my path, and I'm here in the United States ever since.
Oh, nice. And you obviously eventually left CTA for ATOS as well.
Yes, in 2018, I believe end of February, beginning of March, something like that. So I stayed at Caio for a year and a half, almost 2 years, I guess.
Yeah. And how has the move to ATOS sort of changed things for you? How have you felt like the benefits from learning from Galvao and everyone else there?
Yeah, it was a drastic move, honestly. Like, nowadays I'm older, more mature. I can kind of look back and be like, oh, okay, now I've had these actions because of this, maybe, like I can kind of analyze better the situation because I'm more mature. But like just leaving your house, at 15, going to a different country where you know nobody, you don't speak the language. I didn't speak English when I came to the United States. I spoke nothing. I understood nothing.
No way.
I remember Caio picked me up at the airport with his manager from the academy, and I was in the back seat. He was speaking English back and forth with the manager, and I could understand nothing. Like the only things I could understand was whenever they mentioned my name. Like I could be they were talking, and then slowly Andy would pop in the conversation,
Yeah.
but not really talking to me. They're just mentioning my name, and then I'll try to understand what they were saying, but I couldn't understand anything, you know. So just that itself, being away from home and just leaving home at 15 to a different country, different culture, language, you know, it's already a big change, right?
Yeah.
And then you stay in a place where, you know, it was the place and the academy and the people that kind of welcomed you to this new environment, and you stay there for like a year and a half, 2 years, and suddenly you need to leave. It's a big shock, you know. It's a big shock on top of everything already. So I remember when I first got at ATOS, like it took me a while to actually digest and like feel just feel like, okay, I'm part of this shit. Does that make sense? It took me a little bit to digest, you know. Like I remember when I first got at ATOS, I felt so much like pressure, like not that anybody put pressure on me, never, but I was putting pressure on myself, and I just felt like I needed to perform and I needed to do this and that, you know, and I was never like relaxed, I guess, you know, like I was always like tension and under pressure, like pressure that my own mind created, you know.
Yeah. And obviously, you know, you've pretty much been, well, you have been there since, and eventually got your black belt from Andre as well. Does your dad still train as well back in Japan or here in the States?
Yes, my parents, they still live in Japan. They live in this island called Okinawa, you know.
Yeah.
And nowadays my dad is a black belt. He teach classes there. He doesn't own the academy, but it's this academy called Carpe Diem. They have a few affiliations around Japan, and one of them is in Okinawa. And he is one of the head coaches there, you know, teaching classes. So he teach classes to adult and to kids. And nowadays he's also teaching jiu-jitsu classes inside the base, because in Okinawa they had the American base there for the army. So he's teaching jiu-jitsu classes inside the base like a few times a week, or once or twice a week, something like that. It's pretty cool.
Do you manage to train with him when you go back there, or?
Yeah, like I'll visit him. I visited my parents earlier this year. Not earlier this year. It was in June, July, right after Worlds. I went home and visited my parents. I was able to like do some flow sparring with my dad. And I saw. I taught a seminar at his academy. Not his academy. The academy where he teaches. It was pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Nice.
It's crazy to see how jiu-jitsu connected us, and it just built our lives in different, like, you know, paths, but still with something like that we can share in common, you know.
Oh, that's awesome. And moving on to your sort of actual competitive career, the biggest thing you won up until this year, was, or until last week I should say, was Nogi Worlds back in 2022. If you don't mind me asking, how come you haven't really competed in Nogi since then?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I competed Nogi Worlds in 2022 at the end of the year, it wasn't in my plans to do Nogi Worlds. It happened last minute. I remember I was training for a super fight in the gi against Matheus Rodrigues at the IBJJF GP. And I trained like a few weeks, like as a camp. I'm always training, but ever since I signed a contract, maybe I had like 6 weeks for the competition, for the super fight against Matheus. And then I was able to win, and then after that, it's like end of the year, you know, it was almost like December, I guess. All right, what's next? Am I done for the year, you know? And then professor was like, Andy, why don't you do Nogi Worlds? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm not training Nogi yet. We have like maybe 4 weeks left, and I don't even have points. I was like, I don't even have points, you know. And then he was like, yeah, next weekend they have a Houston Open. You can do that, win and get the points. And I'm like, all right, let's do that. So literally, like, I competed Houston Open with a few days of Nogi training. I won Nogi. I won the Houston Open. I was able to win against. I remember I did the final against. I can't really remember his name, but he had just won Nogi Pens that year at that division, middleweight. So I did the final against him. I was able to win Then winning the Open gave me enough points to sign up for Nogi Worlds. And then at that point, we had like maybe 2-3 weeks to the competition. I kept training Nogi and then won Nogi Worlds, you know. And then because it wasn't in our plans, it was kind of like, okay, we won Nogi Worlds. And after that, a few opportunities popped up as far as like Super Fight and GP, Nogi GP. But I already had my plans set for the following year, which was 2023. So I already have plans to compete Europeans and PANs and maybe Brazilian nationals. And I had like a Spider. I don't know if you remember, I competed Spider Invitational in Korea. And they were all gi tournaments. So whenever I got opportunities to be like, hey, would you like to do who's number one? It was like kind of always last minute, last 2 weeks notice. It was a hard transition, you know, like I was very focused in the gi. I had these competitions that I already planned to compete. And then suddenly I would have to like switch to a no-gi with 2 weeks notice against always, you know, against someone tough or like well-known in the no-gi community. It just didn't make sense, you know? But we'll see. Next year I want to do some no-gi. I'm not doing no-gi Worlds this year, but next year if I'm able to do some no-gi super fights, I'm really interested about it, on doing that. You know, we'll see. I'm talking right now with some events, and hopefully I can do some more no-gi next year. You know, hopefully.
Nice. Is there anyone that you've got your eye on? Anyone that you would like to compete against if the opportunity came up in no-gi?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know. Like, because I want Nogi Worlds. I know Nogi Worlds, and it's a title, but that was end of 2022, and I haven't competed in Nogi in a while. You know, honestly, anyone from 77 kilo, you know, that's the weight division, I guess, for the Nogi 77. Actually, that division probably fits me well. It's the one that fits me the most because middleweight with a day before a win, I'm kind of like small for the division. I would say, you know, like I competed the crown just this week, and then you can see the size difference, obviously. But 77, I feel like 77 for a day before I'm there. You know, it would be the division that I fit the most. And honestly, anyone from that division, I know I've talked with who's number one a few times, and like we mentioned Elijah Dorsey. It was after ADCC this year, you know. He had already won trials and placed at ADCC. We mentioned Elijah Dorsey, Oliver Taza, you know, Aspen. Like Aspen was also in the negotiation, I guess. So all those names would be a cool first match at some of these events, you know, to get started again at Nogi scenes, you know. And I think they're tough competitors, you know. Like I mean, Elijah just won ADCC trials. He placed at ADCC. It's not like I'm trying to get an easy first match. That's not the case, you know.
None of them are easy matches.
You know. So we'll see.
When you mentioned ADCC as well, would you have any interest in doing trials yourself to try and get an invite to ADCC next time around?
Yeah, so this year, this year we had ADCC, right? And I have Brazilian passport, so I need to do trials in Brazil. And I believe trials in Brazil happened earlier this year around March.
You have
at
two,
that
1
time,
week after the other.
Yeah, and then at that time I was still in my green card process, so I couldn't leave the country. Nowadays, I have thank God I have my green card, you know. But when the trials was actually happening, I was still in process, so I couldn't leave the United States, and that's one of the reasons I didn't do Nogi, you know, this year, or I didn't join ADCC or even the trials, you know. And because I couldn't do the trials, we were like, you know what, since you can't really leave the country, and this year is gonna be huge because ADCC and CJI. You know, like we felt like we wouldn't have a lot of other opportunities to do Nogi besides ADCC and CGI at the time. So we decided to prioritize more gi tournaments instead. You know, which makes more sense, right?
For sure.
But now that I have my green card, like for the next ADCC trials, who knows? how it's gonna happen or when it's gonna happen. I guess
Yeah.
we don't know the future. There's a lot of crazy tournaments popping up and with a lot of money.
Yeah.
But if things go the way it's been going, like I'll do the next trials in Brazil for sure at 77.
Nice. Do you, if you don't mind me asking, do you have the ability to do the Asian trials as well, or no?
I can't because in Japan they don't allow dual
Oh,
citizenship. They don't allow, and I only have the Brazilian passport. Even though I was born in Japan, My
yeah,
parents are Brazilian. My parents are Brazilian. They went to Japan to
yeah,
work, and I was born there. And because of that, they never allow me to actually have a Japanese passport or whatever.
yeah.
And
Oh,
because of that, Mo was like, "Hey, you gotta do it in Brazil," and I'm like, sorry, I can't make it, not yet, but maybe in
yeah.
the future,
Cool, cool. I mean, it'll be really good if we do get to see you against, like you said, some of those names like Taza, Espen. They'd be really interesting matches. Yeah.
for sure.
So onto like your actual gi career, like you said, since 2022, you've been literally right there at Worlds every single year. I think it's 3 silvers in a row now, isn't it? 22, 23, and 24. Um, if we go back to like the first one against, it was Tainan, wasn't it? What would you say you've sort of like learned from that first match back in 22? How did you take from that to move forward and sort of improve?
For sure. I think honestly in 2022, my biggest takeaway it was not just it wasn't a lot about my professional career or professional life. It was more about my personal life. Because
Okay.
we are an athlete, but most of the day you're more like a normal person. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Like you're an athlete when maybe you're training, when you're competing, maybe doing an interview here. This is part of my athlete job, you know,
Yeah.
or teaching classes. But after that, you're like a boyfriend, a husband, a dad, a son.
Mm.
Like the athlete part of your life is it's very small compared to your personal life. Does that make sense? Your
Yeah.
professional life is very small percentage, especially like if we go long term, like for the whole life, maybe 80 years, 90,
Yeah.
100 years. Like you're gonna leave really small percentage of your life as an athlete, as a profession. And that was my biggest takeaway. I feel like in 2022 up to that point, I've always put a lot of focus just on my like professional career, and then everything else was kind of like I didn't put enough water on it.
Yeah.
And man, if your personal life is not going well, your professional life won't go well. They're linked,
Yeah.
right? And that was my biggest takeaway. And then Worlds 2022, to be very honest, like close people know, people that are around me know, I was not gonna even compete. I was not gonna even
Right.
compete. Crazy. And then I was doing lightweight for the beginning of the year. I did
Yeah.
pans lightweight. I did some other opens lightweight. And then you can see like a world just popped up to middleweight, because I wasn't really training, like it
Yeah.
was I was just not good in a good state, I would say, like
Yeah.
as a person, as my mind, whatever. I decided to do world regardless. I did it. I went all the way to the final. But in my semifinal, I had Tommy in my semifinal. And then in
Yeah.
the beginning of the match, I popped my rib with him, broke my rib.
Mm.
Maybe like 2-3 minutes in the match. I was able to continue fighting. I was able to win the semifinals and, go on to the finals. But the semifinal happened early in the morning, around 10, 11 a.m. The finals
Yeah.
happens around like 5, 6 p.m. Right?
Mm.
Man, I could barely move with my rib. I couldn't be on bottom. I couldn't just turn to the side. It was my only strategy was like I never really thought about not fighting the final though. I never really
Yeah.
thought about that. I was like in my mind, I was like, okay, I need to be on top. Like with
Yeah.
a broken rib, I can't do any rotation. It was very painful. I was like, I can't really contract my core a lot. I gotta be on top. So if you watch the match, I start with a nice takedown,
Mm.
and I'm trying to stay on top. And when I take him down in the beginning of the match, I kind of forget about my rib. So I stand up with him from the close guard, and if I deadlift him off the ground, and I felt my rib popping, And then as I'm thinking about that, like things are happening, he's getting X guard, he's sweeping me, and then I'm like, oh, I can't be on bottom. I gotta find a way to get back on my feet or end up on top, and then because I already almost passing me, and then like that was a disaster, right? Like, but then fast forward, like at the Crown, like he chose not to compete the final because of an injury, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if I had taken the same decision, would have been better or worse in my scenario. I don't know. We'll never know because I decided to do the final regardless. But I wonder if things would happen differently afterwards,
Yeah.
As far as I don't know. I don't regret doing the final at 2022 with a broken rib, but I know I wasn't at my best. And
Yeah.
I'm not here saying like if it wasn't for that, like I would have won. I believe that was his day. It was meant to happen that way. I really believe that God's plans are bigger than ours, and if things happen that way, it's because He planned that way. So I'm not here trying to be like, oh, if it wasn't for this, things would be different. Not really, But I wonder, like, what if I decided to not complete the final? What could have been different after that?
Yeah.
I never really thought about it up until this weekend when
Yeah.
him and his team decided to not do the finals, and I totally respect him about it. Nothing against it. If that's their decision, it's not on me to judge, or it's not on me to be like, hey, I don't agree with this. No, it's their decision, right? But after that, I started reflecting, and then I was questioning myself a lot about that.
Yeah. It's one of those things as well. You don't want to dwell on something like that too much because I mean it's 2 years ago now, isn't it? It's something that I think, like you said, an athletic career is only so long. You kind of always have to look forward, don't you? You know what I mean?
Yes, and honestly, like I've had other tournaments and challenges that, like, I did it, not injury, like severe injury. I never really got any severe injuries. I had a broken rib, and that's about it. But like I've had tournaments and challenges that I was maybe sick, food poisoning, feeling under the weather, and I was able to still go out there and win. Maybe I didn't perform at my best, but it was enough to win, and I felt like after overcoming that personal challenge, because it's more personal than anything, right? Like especially if you're like if you're not at your best, maybe you're sick, you're injured, whatever, and you still go out there and then you're able to overcome that challenge, man, you grow so much after that. That experience builds you so much. Like you'd be like, man, at the conditions I had, I was able to do this. Imagine it with better conditioning, with better conditions, So that builds you so much. And maybe because of that, I've also decided to do the final that year. Who knows? But that's my mentality. That's my mentality. Obviously, we always have in life. We're always gonna have to take decisions, and sometimes it'll be more risky. And it's hard to say what's right or wrong. To be honest, it's hard.
So if you fast forward then to 2023, that was the final against Gustavo Batista, and I think obviously I didn't actually realize that you broke the ribs, so I mean that does explain a lot as well because in 2023 against Gustavo, the difference, the margin was much smaller. I mean it was just points then, and it was a much closer match, wasn't it? What did you sort of take from that then coming into this year then?
Yeah, honestly, like during the finals last year against Batista, it was a wild experience. Like just doing Worlds as a medium heavy was a very challenging and different experience. Which man, it taught me a lot of lessons. I'm not gonna lie. And But at the same time, like, cause I train with Batista, you know, like we're really close friends and we're teammates and we train every day, almost every day with each other. You know, I was a color belt and he was already winning worlds at the black belt, you
Yeah.
know. And I learned a lot from him. Like people say, oh, Andy has a similar game to Batista, right? We have similar games. It's not that he has a similar game to mine. It's like I have a similar game to his. You know, I learned a lot from him,
Yeah.
especially in during the pandemic when it first started in 2020. Like we didn't have a lot of people in the academy still training. A lot of like the athletes, they had to go back to their country, right? Because
Yeah.
everything was shutting down. And we stayed here and we were training, drilling every day. You know, like I was learning a lot from him, a lot from him. So it was a mix of feeling, you know, like it was also my first time ever competing against a teammate and a friend, first time ever.
Yeah.
And that first time ever is already a world's final. It's a different experience, right? For sure.
Yeah.
After that, I matured a lot as an athlete, like as far as like seeing competition as a job,
Yeah.
as part of my job and profession, you know, because you see often people closing out divisions and this and that. Not being against it, but I feel like if you want to be professional, regardless, you need to fight. You know, you need to compete. And
Yeah.
like, I'm not gonna say I was ready for that experience, but after leaving that experience, now I feel like I'm ready for future experiences like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Yeah.
I won't be at the price, or I won't be like, oh, this is a first time thing, or not knowing how to act in that scenario. You know, like I feel like that
Yeah.
experience taught me a lot, and I'm very grateful for that.
Nice. And then obviously you come into this year where it was the final against Mika, and I think it's quite interesting to see because every single final has been that much closer as well. Obviously, it was just advantages this time. How, how did that feel? You know, coming up against Mika and getting that literally that close to the win.
Yeah, you know, it's honestly, I was it was a mix of feeling too. He got those 2 points that in my mind I don't think it was points. You know, like after talking to some referees as well. It's funny because he was awarded 2 points off a scenario during the match, right?
Yeah.
And I, I've asked IBJJF referees, other referees. I don't want to mention names, but
Yeah.
I've asked other referees, and they be like, if I was that referee, I wouldn't give points. I don't think this was 2 points.
Mm.
And I'm not, again, not saying like it would definitely be different if it wasn't for those 2 points, because we will never know, right? We still had
Yeah.
like a minute and a half left, and again we go back to God's plans. I really believe that God's plans are bigger than ours, you know. So if things happen that way, it was supposed to happen that way. But
Yeah.
in my mind, like sometimes I question myself, what if he wasn't awarded those 2 points? You know, what could it be different, right?
Yeah.
But my biggest takeaway from this year's world championship was that you get to places that you're able to first get there mentally. So before you're able to get there physically, you need to be able to get there mentally. You need to be able to
Yeah.
visualize. And that was my biggest takeaway. Like I feel like we can achieve anything we want in life. Like anything. It's just you need to really believe you can achieve. You need to be able to see yourself achieving, and then you're gonna get there. And
Yeah.
and it's funny because sometimes we have that, but you're not really conscious about that. It's like unconscious. You're
Yeah.
just, living life, I guess. Dreaming. But I feel like after that experience, I was able to kind of unlock that power in my mind and just intentionally visualize things, intentionally see myself achieving things or getting to higher heights. you know.
Yeah.
And ever since, I'm not talking about just results in competition or on the mat, like as far as an athlete. I'm talking about also for everyday life. And I feel like after that experience, after I started like doing that more intentionally, and knowing that like we can reach higher heights with that type of mindset,
Yeah.
has improved my life in so many ways that it's hard to describe. It's hard to measure. It's something that it's hard to measure, right? The power of the mind. Like I've always heard about it. Oh, mind is everything. Mind is everything. Mind is powerful, but we can't really measure it. It's not like you're deadlifting like 500 pounds and then suddenly you're deadlifting 600 pounds, right? It's not like that. It's hard to measure. But I feel like this year, not at Worlds specifically, but like the whole season from January to June, my biggest takeaway was that like you can achieve anything you're able to visualize.
Nice. That's a really nice sort of like journey then into the crown this year, because like you said, you know, if you're finding that visualizing is helping you to get to that next level, I think you pretty much proved it at the crown the other day. Because like you said, even though you weren't able to have the final with Tainan, you still looked phenomenal through the first two matches. How did you find the crown? How was it? It's just obviously your second time doing it as well now, isn't it?
Yeah, I felt great at the crown, to be honest. I think I had a really good first match against Jaime Canuto, someone that he was already competing at the highest level in the black belt when I was a juvenile. I was a juvenile, I was a blue belt, you know. So competing the first match against him was like it was a cool experience. I guess honestly, it was probably my first time facing someone like that. Like that I was a juvenile and he was already competing the highest out of the black belt. The first time. So that goes another experience, right? Another thing on my history that will build me like to be a better like pack, I would say, you know. But I was able to. I didn't get the sub in my first match, but I was able to control the pace and impose my game and sweep, pass. I didn't get a finish, but I was able to win with a good control. So I was happy with that. Obviously, not as happy as if I had finished, but I was happy with my performance. And it was just the first match of the day. It can be you have more adrenaline, you're a little bit more nervous, and all that plays out, right? But then my second match, I was like, I want to do different. I want to do different. And I was able to find a submission at the end. So I was able to sweep, pass, mount, and then finish. I was really happy about that performance because last year at the Crown, my first match was against Mauricio. And I believe I won only by one finish of passing attempt, and that was it. So it was a really tough match. And a year later, facing him again, and then being able to control the match and find a submission, like it was a good. It made me feel good about my improvement.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's a confirmation of all the hard work, all the training, and all the things I've been doing. It's working. It's working. So I was really happy with that. The final didn't happen, right? The final didn't happen because Tainan injured his hand. I believe it was broken already, and then throughout the competition, the first and second match, it got worse. It's still impressive that with a broken hand, he was able to do the first and second match, and apparently he dominated those two matches as well. So it's. I wonder how would have been the match if we fought. But in my mind, throughout the preparation, I was visualizing myself. I kind of expected me and him to be in the final. I kind of expected, unless we happened to happen like a semifinal or first match. But I kind of expected us to be in opposite sides and maybe doing the final. And I was visualizing a lot, like winning all three matches and having him in the final and winning the final against him and then earning my crown. And I was visualizing that a lot. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But again, if everything happens for a reason. Everything happens the way it has to happen. If that was the way it had to happen, I'm fine with it. I'm grateful, can't complain.
Yeah.
And I'm
Well,
sure we'll have more. I'm sure in the future we're gonna have more opportunities, and also even for my own, like, like I don't wanna. I've had 2 matches against Tainan. I lost twice, so like it's 0-2 for him, and it's a match I was looking forward to at the Crown,
yeah.
but it's like I want to be able to win against his best version. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Like I would be happy. Let's say we fought and he wasn't at his best, and it's not in my hand. It's not it's not on me, right? Like I did everything
Yeah.
I could to be at my best. Things happened to me in my preparation, but I was still there, and we can't really control those outside factors. I would say,
Yeah.
we can't really control, but I would still be happy, if I won, if we fought and I won, I would still be happy, obviously, But
Yeah.
I would be a lot happier, and I'd rather have a win when we're both on our best versions. I
Yeah.
think that would be better for myself. That would be better for the public who's watching. That would be better for everyone, right? But again,
Yeah.
things happens the way it has to happen, and we can't really control that. And I have nothing but respect to Tainan. I really wish him a speedy recovery. I know how hard it is to deal with injuries. Like I think
Yeah.
losing is one thing, but if you're healthy and you lose, next day you show up to the academy, you can train, you get back to your normal life, right? But when you're injured, it changes a lot of things, right? It's
Yeah.
not just like, oh, next day it's a normal, you get back to work. Not really, right? So I really wish him a speedy recovery. I hope he's able to come back to training and competitions as soon as possible. And who knows, maybe in the future we can set up this fight, or maybe it will happen in other events. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if you keep competing in the same weight classes as well, it's something that, like I said, where you've been right there in the final in Worlds now 3 years in a row. Tainan's the same. He's been there, other than the DQ recently. He's been there every single year. So I mean, realistically, it's going to happen sooner or later. I think.
Yeah, and we're still young. We're only 24 years old, so
Exactly.
we have a long road ahead of us.
Are you eager to get the match back though? Do you want to get it again?
Sorry.
Are you eager to get the match again though? You want to get that rematch?
Yeah, it would be good if I could get a match with him in the future. No, I think for this year I'm done as far as competition. But if we
Yeah.
could compete next year, I don't know what are his plans. I haven't decided what are my plans for next year yet. Like I said, I really want to do some nogi stuff too. We'll see.
Yeah.
But it's a match that I'm sure it will happen sooner or later. It will happen.
Well, I mean, he's been doing nogi matches as well the last year or so now. So I mean, you never know. You might end up meeting nogi instead.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, it would be cool.
That's pretty much everything I wanted to run through with you, really, Andy. Is there anything you want to say, or anyone you want to give a shout out to, or a special thanks to from winning the crown the other day?
Yeah, man, a lot of people to thank, right? I've already thanked everyone that are in my closest circle,
Yeah,
but I want to thank all the fans, all the media for everything, IBJJF for the opportunity. I'm super stoked I was able to be part of the second edition and the first edition as well. And
yeah,
then being able to come back the second edition with the crown on my head, it felt really special too. And being able just to close the year with such a good title, important title in my
yeah.
resume, that also feels really good. And so I really want to thank IBJJF, Flow Grappling as well for the event, and I'm ready for more. I want to get the second crown next year, hopefully.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thanks very much for your time, Andy.
Thank you so much, man. Have a good one. Thank you for having me here. Really appreciate you, and hopefully we can make more interviews in the future.
No problem at all. I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank
See
you.
you. See
Bye
you.
bye.